Good afternoon. The following presentation will be an analysis of the definition of educational technology in the field of educational technology and represents the collaborative effort by Laura Hamilton, Jeremy Render, and Diane Lawson. The definition that we'll be using to study educational technology is given by Januszewski and Melinda, and it states educational technology is the study and ethical practice of facilitating learning and improving performance by creating, using, and managing appropriate technological processes and resources. This definition is one that's very broad and encompassing, and so our goal today is to break the definition down into its specific components, see if we can define those components in themselves, and find practical applications within the classroom. In order to help us break down this definition of educational technology, we're actually going to use the components that are contained within the definition itself. And so the first thing that we will look at is the study of educational technology. After that, we'll look at the ethical practice of educational technology. Next, we'll look at how educational technology can be used to facilitate learning and how it can be used to improve performance and what those actually mean. After that, we'll look at creating, using, and managing educational technology. Then we'll look at the technological processes involved. And finally, we'll look at the technological resources that are available for educators. We'll begin with the study of educational technology. And the acknowledgement that there is a study of educational technology is really fundamental to effectively implementing any sort of educational technology in the classroom. According to the Association for Educational Communications and Technology, a study is information gathering and analysis beyond the traditional concepts of research. And so when we say that there's a study of educational technology, what we're recognizing is that there has to be reasoning and there has to be research for implementing educational technology in the classroom. In other words, we can't just use technology for the sake of using technology. For example, we can't move to a one-to-one program in which our students get devices without having real research and real reasoning as to why we're moving to that program and what we want our goals to be. In order to know why and what our goals are going to be, we have to have spent time studying educational technology. Also, the study of educational technology is the realization that the fact that it is a field just like any other field that's constantly growing and constantly changing. And so in order to stay abreast, we have to make sure that we spend adequate time studying the field of educational technology. One of the unique components of the field of educational technology is the very real need to look at the ethics that are involved. According to the Association for Educational Communications and Technology, ethics in educational technology are not merely rules and expectations, but they're a basis for practice. And so when we commit to using educational technology in our classrooms, we have to realize that there are going to be ethical aspects that we have to consider for students and teachers. When we think about students, we have to realize that there are so many things that they can face, from privacy and safety to unauthorized access to objectionable material. And although that might look very different for the elementary student as opposed to the high school student, what we have to do as educators and advocates for educational technology is move beyond the do and do not lists and the acceptable use policies and really educate our students on digital citizenship and the way to use technology ethically. For example, if I'm going to have my students do research and write a paper based on that research, there has to be the conversation on things such as plagiarism, on acceptable sources to use, on how to use those sources properly, and all of those conversations have to come into play in order to make sure that our students are effectively and ethically using the technology. There are also a lot of things that we have to consider for teachers when it comes to the ethical use of technology. This could be something as small as a teacher using the technology to influence grades or that kind of thing, but something like whether or not the teacher is actually using the technology to help their students learn, or is it being used to babysit their students in their classroom. That's an ethical question that could arise when we look at our teachers. And so the same concept kind of applies as it does to students. We have to make sure that we educate our teachers on the ways to ethically use educational technology and help them to realize that they are ultimately responsible for the use of technology in their classroom. And if we can build this culture of ethical use, it can help us to ensure that educational technology is being used effectively and ethically. One of the most basic ideas that any educator has to consider when looking at the field of educational technology is whether or not the technology is being used in a genuine way with fidelity. In other words, again, are we just using technology for the sake of using technology, or is it really being used to facilitate learning? And so facilitating learning is an important concept to consider when looking at the field of educational technology. According to Arnold, a facilitator in the field of education is a teacher who understands the topic, is skilled in the use of the current methods and techniques, and who actively studies and pays attention to the psychological learning that's taking place. And so what we have to do as educators is make sure that those accountability measures are put into place to show us whether or not the use of technology is really helping our students learn. Like Arnold mentions in the definition, is someone who actively studies. And so we have to be active, looking at data, looking at assessments, both formative and summative, to make sure that the technology we're using is really helping our students learn. In other words, if I put my students on an adaptive learning program, for example, I need to make sure that that technology is really helping my students learn and is not just something that they're doing for the sake of using technology. Putting those measures into place to make sure that the technology we're using in our classroom really facilitates learning helps move into the next concept, which is really important, which is improving performance. In other words, if we're using educational technology to truly facilitate learning, then we should see growth in our students and improved performance. The Association for Educational Communications and Technology, when they look at learning in terms of educational technology, they're looking for what they consider deep learning, active use, and productive learning. In other words, not just improved performance on a standardized test, but improved performance in a way that shows that students really have a deep understanding of the material. One of the examples that comes to my mind is the use of Google Cardboard, which is a virtual reality program that can be used to help students go on field trips anywhere in the world. And that technology in itself can really help fill gaps that students miss and help them to get the experiences that they need to truly understand. And so one of the ways that you could use it is, for example, if you were studying the trenches of World War I, you could use that virtual reality app to actually go and experience what those trenches look like. Go in the trenches, see what it was like for the soldiers and those kinds of things. And so what that does is that helps the students gain a deeper understanding of the concept, a deeper understanding of the material. And it's not just using technology as a fun activity. One of the tools that you'll often hear used in the field is the SAMR method, the SAMR method. And what that does is that has teachers really look at their use of technology and see whether it's just replacing something that they could have done with paper and pencil, or whether it's really redefining the lesson. And so if we take the time through studying educational technology and really focus on whether it's providing this deep learning that AECT talks about, then we're really looking at using technology to improve our students' performance. When we look at the definition of educational technology, one of the major concepts included is the concept of creating. And creating really bridges the gap between the educator and the student when you're looking at the field of educational technology. Um, Educational technology naturally promotes a sense of creativity. Um, Again, the Association for Educational Communications and Technology says that creation refers to the research, theory, and practice involved in the generation of learning environments in many different settings, formal and non formal. So, in other words, when teachers go to use educational technology, they really have to think about whether they're creating a thoughtful lesson and activity, something that's really going to help facilitate learning and improve performance. The other benefit of educational technology is that it really provides our students the opportunity to design and be creative in the classroom. And not only do they get to design and be creative, but they get to design and be creative in a relevant way. One of the beauties of educational technology is that it is a field that is constantly evolving and constantly becoming more prevalent in our society. And so, as educators and students, if we get the opportunity to use educational technology to create, we're making our classrooms, we're making our learning environments more relevant uh, and more effective. Using educational technology really connects back to that initial study of the field of educational technology. In other words, when teachers commit to using technology in their classroom, they have to ensure that there's real research and there's real reasoning behind it. The Association for Educational Communications and Technology, they define using technology as where the solution meets the problem. And while this is sort of an abstract definition, when you think about it, it really makes sense. For example, let's say a teacher is wanting their students to create models of the side houses that pioneers used or created when they moved out west. And they want the students to create a model to show that they understand what these side houses were all about and the life of these pioneers. They may not have access to the resources or the materials that would be needed to create a model, and so they could use something like the application Minecraft, which would be the use of educational technology. And on Minecraft, students have access to any kind of materials. They can build a model and they can show that they understand these side houses and this way of life. Um, and the teacher can see that they're truly learning the material. And so the teacher had a problem, and educational technology and the use of educational technology helped bring a solution to this problem. Managing educational technology is a critically important component. And so, what we have to do is we have to make sure that there are systems in place to ensure that technology is being used appropriately. In other words, we can't just put a class set of devices or some sort of smart board or digital cameras or any sort of technology. We can't just put it in the classroom and say, go. We have to make sure that there are systems in place that ensure technology is being used appropriately and effectively. And it could be something as small as numbering student devices to ensure that students are using the same device, and that connects directly back to ethics. Uh, or it can be something as complex as using a learning management system such as Blackboard or Canvas or Schoology to ensure that students are progressing through the curriculum and the material uh, in the way that we know is most appropriate and best for their learning. In other words, when we think about technology, we have to make sure that there are management systems in place to ensure that it's used effectively, ethically, and in the way that is most beneficial for both educators and students. The Association for Educational Communications and Technology define a process as a series of activities that are directed towards a specific result or a specific goal. And so when we think about technological processes in educational technology, what we really think about is the fact that using technology in the classroom is something that is a series of steps. It's something that we have to teach our teachers and our students to use. We cannot just hand them an iPad and expect them to make an iMovie. We can't just give them a set of laptops and expect them to be able to create PowerPoints. There are certain steps that occur along the way, and it could be something as simple as how to turn the device on, all the way up to how to edit and trim videos. In other words, using technology in the classroom is a process, and it takes steps and it takes time in order to help both teachers and students use it effectively. Technological resources is probably the fastest growing component in the field of educational technology today. The Association for Educational Communications and Technology, they refer to technological resources as the pool of resources and the pool of tools that are available to educators. And we know that those tools and those resources that we have today vastly outnumber what we had even a couple of years ago. And so the most interesting, or probably the most important thing to consider when we're looking at technological resources is how it connects back to all of the previous components we've looked at. In other words, if we're going to look at a resource, we have to make sure it's grounded in research. We have to make sure that we're using that resource ethically. We have to ensure that that resource is going to let us improve performance and lead to genuine student learning. Is that resource going to help a solution meet a problem? And so it's kind of difficult in the fact that we have so many things that are available to us that we have to kind of vet through. But because we have so many things that are available to us, we have that many more solutions that are available for both our educators and our students. In conclusion, when we look at the definition of educational technology given to us by Januszewski and Melinda, what we really see is that all of these components are tightly connected and intertwined with one another. In other words, we can't look at whether technology is facilitating true learning and improving performance without looking at the research and the reasoning and studying educational technology. We can't expect our teachers to use and manage technology without having a firm understanding of the ethics that are concerned. We can't allow our teachers and our students to be creative without dipping into the technological resources and learning the processes that go along with that technology. All of this is connected, all of this is important, and all of it is essential to effectively using educational technology in our classrooms.